Why use the word pure? In English, the word pure, why? In thinking, we rid ourselves of all sensibilities, and we enter into thinking itself. It seems like we are still thinking ourselves, but in reality, we let go of our ego and consciously enter into a realm of objective thinking. How would you put this? Imagine you're doing some math, like basic arithmetic. Let me tell you a story that brings this home. There was this kid in America named Brimman who had some physical challenges, but he was also in elementary school learning math. So, one day the teacher is teaching multiplication, like, if 1 barrel of apple juice costs $2, how much for 3 barrels? It's a simple question. Well, when the teacher asked this, Brimman raised his hand and said, "Hey, I can't drink all that apple juice, it's too sour." Poor kid just couldn't get his head around the math and was stuck thinking about how sour apple juice is. It was clear he needed some help. You see, in these math problems, they might bring up stuff like apple juice, but what we're really aiming for is pure math thinking, like 2 times 3 equals 6. Simple as that. So, even though the problem talks about apple juice, you gotta keep personal stuff out of it. Getting into math thinking is all about going back to basics and keeping it pure. You're pondering this question, and it's good that you're using your noggin. But what does it mean to use your noggin? It means putting aside your own personal thoughts and getting into the zone of objective thinking. Objective thinking, like in the earlier example, is thinking about things like arithmetic in an objective way, which means you've got to get into pure thinking. So, to learn and discover stuff, you've got to break free from the world of senses. Breaking free from the world of senses is the only way for us to find the truth, and that's what pure thinking is all about. Distinguishing between thinking and other psychological activities is essential. While psychological activities are tied to individual characteristics, thinking operates differently. It's free from personal traits. When diving into knowledge, you need to let go of your ego. This highlights the significance of pure thinking, reflecting how ancient Greeks advanced European thought. Instead of saying, "I am thinking," it's more accurate to say, "Thought is guiding us." Our minds serve the purpose of pure, objective thinking, aligning with a grand purpose. A successful thinker is someone who lets go of their personal quirks and dives into objective thinking to find the truth. When tackling a math problem, emotions shouldn't cloud your judgment. You need to follow pure logic, step by step, until you reach the right answer. This meticulous approach is crucial in studying math, physics, or any natural science. For instance, Einstein is really amazing, yes, truly remarkable. No matter how awesome he is, he's basically just rocking it for physics and thinking. He's on a mission from the universe. Now, to take physics thinking to the next level, you need to discover a hero from the masses to spark a physics revolution. They found that hero, and they called him Einstein. But imagine if this Einstein had kicked the bucket early on. He wouldn't have had the chance to dive into relativistic physics, wouldn't have had a shot at revolutionizing physics. But hey, it's all good. The evolution of physics thinking follows a logical process and has already reached a level of maturity. At this point in the physics game, it's all grown up and will surely summon the brilliant physicists it needs from the vast sea of humanity. If Einstein had left the scene early, there'd still be other Einsteins, Einstein number 2, Einstein number 3, no sweat. Western thinking has come a long way, which means that diving into pure thinking involves letting go of your individuality and not getting caught up in the idea that you're super important. It's all about immersing yourself in pure thinking, and let me tell you, the rules are strict. You've got to leave behind all your personal biases and quirks. That's where Parmenides comes in with his groundbreaking idea about pure thinking. So, Parmenides dropped this gem: trust your thoughts, not your senses, because your senses will lead you down the path of mere opinions, while your thoughts will lead you straight to the truth. Parmenides was the OG when it comes to making a clear distinction between truth and mere opinions in the world of ancient Greek philosophy. In plain English, truth is truth, and opinions are just opinions. Our senses can often lead us astray into the land of opinions, while our thoughts are the ones steering us in the right direction towards the truth. Picture this: you've got a glass of water with a straight chopstick in it, but it looks bent to your eyes. Here's where you should trust your brain over your peepers. That's what Parmenides was getting at. By highlighting this journey towards truth, he laid the groundwork for the later teachings of Plato and Socrates. This journey is all about pure thinking. As they kept on trekking along this road, two big shots, Socrates and Plato, chatted about the whole truth and reality deal. They figured out that reality's truth can only be uncovered through some good old thinking, and that's the only way to really make sense of things. After Parmenides, the next hero on the scene is Socrates. So, what was Socrates' big deal? He tackled the burning question of whether the ways of life, traditions, and customs in the Greek city-states back in the day were really keeping it real with the truth. Socrates once said something we all know: you gotta take a good look at your life to make it worth living. Back in the day in ancient Greek city-states, life was all about following the old-school traditions from their religion, without really questioning them. The folks in each city-state just went along with it, basing their lives on these traditions and habits that now needed a closer look. The true worth and purpose of our lives don't come from what the city-state demands, but from using your brain power. It's all about examining the roots of your life, you feel me? Socrates wanted to bring ancient Greek philosophy back to reality instead of keeping it in the clouds. He cared more about the values that hold human society together and how to deal with them. The chaos and non-stop fighting among city-states, like the brutal Peloponnesian War, made the Greeks really think about what's true and important, just like in the old days of China before the Qin dynasty or Eastern Zhou dynasty, 8th to 3rd century BCE. In the final years of the Eastern Zhou dynasty, things were a mess with the Zhou royal family losing power. Vassal states were fighting each other like crazy, blood flow everywhere. It was a time of falling traditions and wild behaviors. The Greek city-states saw something similar. So why did those first wise folks pop up in these four big nations during the Axial Age? Well, around the 5th century BC, these nations were going through some serious pain. We humans always seem to figure out the truth only after going through tough times, otherwise, we wouldn't bother with deep thinking. The ancient Egyptians didn't really mess around with debates. They were all about knowledge and building stuff, creating a whole civilization. But then, bam, hardship hit them hard. And the ancient Israelites? Man, they had it rough. Constantly getting attacked, wrecked, kicked out, and left with nowhere to call home by those foreign folks. 3 times they got booted out and eventually lost their homeland. Remember when Moses led them out of Egypt, heading towards Canaan? Let's go to Canaan, they said, looking at it as the promised land, which is now Jerusalem. Those Israelites, a small, beaten down, expelled, and slaughtered bunch, were desperately waiting for the Messiah to show up, the one who'd save them. And that's how Judaism started. So, what did all that suffering teach them? Why were they always getting kicked around and persecuted by outsiders? Because, well, humans ain't exactly saints. People are just born with sin, like this thing called original sin. So, this little Israelite crew got some spiritual dignity going on. The folks who messed with us were sinners, and yup, we got some sin in us too. But hey, while you all didn't own up to your own wrongs, we did. That's how this whole feeling of spiritual superiority came about, paving the way for the rise of Judaism. We all know about that tough caste system in ancient India. So, there was this prince named Siddhartha, 6th century BCE, who was all up there in status, but then he turned into the Buddha. When he checked out the scene, he realized that no matter how high or low your caste was, we all deal with the same stuff: birth, getting old, getting sick, and kicking the bucket. And well, life and death. They ain't a walk in the park no matter who you are. So, the big question for humanity is, how do we bust out of this suffering? Life is a tough gig. So, after getting all enlightened under that Bodhi tree, Shakyamuni Buddha kicked things off by laying down some truths. Life is suffering, the roots of suffering, there's a way to stop the suffering, and here's how to do it. The Buddha was one cool cat, you know. He looked right into the void, got it, and then set up his whole Buddhism gig. In our real-life existence, there is nothing that can truly help us. Life is an endless sea of suffering. Our pursuit of wealth and prosperity is merely a straw to grasp for survival in this sea of suffering, but it cannot provide lasting relief. Life is filled with ups and downs, so what can we do? There is only one way: discover the root of suffering. The root of our suffering is nameless. Nameless represents afflictions and darkness. Our actions within this nameless realm create karma. This karmic force repeatedly throws us back into the human world, the sea of suffering. This world is called the Saha world. Once you understand why it's like this and grasp the 12 links of dependent origination, you should put an end to it. What does it mean to put an end to it? It means going beyond life and death. Reaching a state of neither being born nor dying, that's what we call nirvana. Understanding this idea is understanding the truth of putting an end to it. If you follow the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the way to practice, that's the Buddha's enlightenment. All 4 nations came up with their big ideas because they went through a lot of suffering. 2 nations get what the emptiness of the existential void is all about, and 2 don't. The Jewish folks in Buddhism understand emptiness, while the others didn't quite get it, but they still came up with some pretty deep thoughts. There's the ancient Greek philosophy on one hand, and the influential ideologies of Confucianism and Taoism in ancient China on the other. As history unfolded, the 2 nations that got emptiness inspired the 2 that didn't quite get it. One reason is that Jewish thinking influenced people in late ancient Greece and beyond. When Jewish thought entered the Greek world, it surprised everyone. They were like, wait, there's a nation that sees human reason as a sin, not something to be proud of? That's wild. The original sin is all about getting wise. So, according to the Old Testament, which is the Jewish Bible, our first human pals, Adam and Eve, were chilling in the Garden of Eden, also known as Paradise. But here's the deal: God had a rule that they couldn't chow down on the fruit from the tree of knowledge. But then, thanks to some sneaky serpent action, they went ahead and took a bite of that forbidden fruit. And bam! Suddenly they were all knowledgeable and stuff. God wasn't too pleased about this, so he kicked them out of the Garden of Eden to make sure they didn't munch on the tree of life and live forever like gods. And that's how the whole messy business of human existence got started. So, we can keep on learning and getting smarter, maybe even becoming all-knowing, thanks to our brain power. But, at the same time, we're stuck being mortal and having to deal with the fact that our existence is limited. It's a real head-scratcher, right? The clash between our finite existence and the potential for endless knowledge is a major conundrum. If someone gets so caught up in gaining knowledge that they forget they're just a regular old mortal, that's what we call sin, the original sin. This idea hit the ancient Greeks like a ton of bricks. They were all about human reason and thought it was the bee's knees, but turns out, that very reason was humanity's downfall. It was a big deal. Then, Jewish thinking mixed with Plato's philosophy and bam, Christianity was born. It's a big deal how a group that didn't get the whole nothingness thing met and got influenced by the deep thoughts of the Jewish people. It really opened up some new ways of thinking. Similarly, the same thing went down in China. Back in the late Western Han Dynasty, 2nd century CE, and the early Eastern Han Dynasty, when those Buddhist scriptures started making their way into China, especially the whole idea of the emptiness of the existential void, it really got the Chinese folks thinking. Suddenly, they were all about sin, which wasn't really on their radar before. According to the Buddhist deal, everyone's got some sin in them. Even if someone was a stand-up, highfalutin kind of person in life, their family still had to do some repenting for them after they kicked the bucket, to help them out in the afterlife. Just goes to show, they were seen as having some sin in them. So, our Chinese nation got a lot of inspiration from ancient Indian Buddhist ideas, which led to the development of Chinese-style Buddhism, known as Zen or Chan Buddhism. This was a big deal, and it later influenced the development of Neo-Confucianism in the Song and Ming dynasties. This shows that the wisdom of different ethnic groups, including the 4 main ethnic groups, inspires each other and can't be replaced. This is pretty clear.